The upscale restaurant buzzed with a peculiar tension that Wednesday evening, the kind that made seasoned servers suddenly discover urgent tasks in the storage room. Leonardum had earned its reputation through decades of discretion and excellence, catering to Boston's elite with the unspoken understanding that wealth commanded deference. The crystal chandeliers cast warm light across white tablecloths, each setting arranged with surgical precision. Soft classical music drifted through air thick with expensive cologne and the weight of unspoken hierarchies. Robert Williams sat alone at table 12, hands folded on the pristine linen, fighting the urge to check his phone for the third time in 5 minutes. The simple button-down shirt he'd chosen that morning felt inadequate now, surrounded by tailored suits and designer dresses that cost more than his monthly rent. He'd arrived 15 minutes early, a habit ingrained from years of manual labor where punctuality meant keeping your job. The other diners barely registered his presence, their conversations flowing around him like water around a stone. A server approached, young and nervous, water pitcher trembling slightly in his grip. Robert offered a reassuring smile, the kind he'd perfected during Emily's anxious first days of school. "Just water for now, thanks. Waiting on someone." The relief on the kid's face was immediate. Robert recognized that gratitude, had seen it countless times on Catherine's face when she'd worked tables at the diner near their old apartment. People treating you like furniture until you made a mistake, then suddenly you existed only as a target for their frustration. The memory tightened something in his chest. The restaurant doors opened with theatrical precision, and the atmosphere shifted like barometric pressure before a storm. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they changed. Voices dropping, postures straightening, eyes tracking movement with predatory awareness. Patricia Montgomery entered as though she owned not just the room but the very air inside it, charcoal suit tailored to mathematical perfection. A single strand of pearls at her throat that probably cost more than Robert's truck. Everything about her projected control, from the measured pace of her stride to the way her gaze swept the space, cataloging and dismissing in equal measure. The hostess materialized instantly, professional smile fixed in place despite the tension radiating through her shoulders. "Ms. Montgomery, we have your table prepared. Where is my dinner companion?" Patricia's voice carried the kind of cold authority that expected immediate answers, not excuses. The hostess consulted her tablet, fingers moving with practiced efficiency that couldn't quite hide her growing unease. "Ms. Montgomery, there seems to be some confusion with tonight's reservations. We have you scheduled to meet a Mr. Reynolds at 7:30, but he hasn't arrived yet. However, we do have another gentleman waiting for a business meeting as well. Perhaps there's been a scheduling mix-up with the consulting firm." Patricia's expression tightened, a hairline fracture in otherwise perfect composure. "Reynolds. I don't know any Reynolds. I'm meeting investment partners arranged by Horizon Consulting. Check again." Robert watched the exchange unfold, recognizing the dynamic from 1,000 similar interactions. The powerful person, the service worker caught between impossible expectations and inadequate information. The inevitable collision. He'd promised Catherine before she died that he'd never let people be diminished like that in his presence, not when he had the power to intervene. The promise had seemed easier to keep back then, when his world was smaller and the stakes less complicated. The hostess's eyes swept the dining room with barely concealed desperation, landing on Robert with the relief of someone finding a life raft in rough seas. She approached his table with Patricia following, and Robert could feel the woman's assessment before she spoke, cataloging his off-the-rack shirt, his working man's hands, the subtle markers of someone who didn't belong in her stratosphere. "Mr. Williams, I apologize for the interruption. There seems to be confusion with our reservation system this evening. Ms. Montgomery is also waiting for a business associate from Horizon Consulting. We're trying to determine if perhaps your parties were meant to meet together." Before Robert could formulate a response, Patricia's gaze swept across the other diners like a scythe through wheat, and when she spoke, her words carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Nobody here is worthy of sitting at the same table as me." The pronouncement hung in the air like smoke after gunfire. Nearby conversations stuttered and died. Servers froze mid-step. Even the classical music seemed to fade into uncomfortable silence. Robert felt the familiar heat rise in his chest, the same fire that had gotten him into trouble more than once when principle collided with pragmatism. He thought of Catherine, exhausted after double shifts, crying in their bathroom because some hedge fund manager had snapped his fingers at her like she was a dog. He thought of Emily, who would inherit whatever world people like Patricia Montgomery chose to create. The words came out calm, steady, carrying none of the anger burning underneath. I don't think that's true. Every eye in the restaurant turned toward him. Patricia's gaze locked onto his face with the intensity of a predator, suddenly noticing unexpected resistance from prey. The moment stretched, elastic and dangerous, until something shifted in her expression. Not softening exactly, but a flicker of genuine surprise that cracked her imperial facade. She sat down across from him with deliberate precision, each movement controlled, and Robert recognized the tactic from high-stakes negotiations with contractors who thought manual laborers were easy to intimidate. Do you know who I am? The question was designed to establish dominance, to remind him of his place in the social order. Robert had heard variations of it his entire working life, always delivered with the same mix of arrogance and genuine bewilderment that someone might not immediately defer to wealth and position. Patricia Montgomery, CEO of Sterling Security Tech, built the company from a garage startup to a multi-billion-dollar enterprise in 15 years, featured in Forbes, Fortune, and probably every other business publication that matters. He met her stare without flinching. But that doesn't give you the right to treat people badly just because they work in service positions. Something dangerous flickered behind Patricia's eyes, but before she could respond, Robert's phone buzzed against the table. The text from Jason Bennett appeared on screen, and Robert felt his stomach drop even as he maintained his outward composure. David, massive screw-up with reservations. Reynolds can't make it. Patricia Montgomery was supposed to be at Capitol Grill, not Leonardum. Total admin disaster. Call tomorrow to reschedule. Sorry, man. Robert turned the phone so Patricia could read the message. Her jaw tightened, frustration bleeding through her careful control. Typical administrative incompetence. This wastes more of my time than I can afford. She started to rise, clearly done with the evening, but Robert's voice stopped her. Or you could stay, have dinner. The food's supposedly excellent and you're already here. The suggestion clearly surprised her. Patricia Montgomery didn't receive invitations from maintenance workers to share meals. Her entire posture communicated that reality with crystal clarity. But something in Robert's steady gaze seemed to intrigue her. The same curiosity a scientist might show when encountering an unexpected variable in a familiar experiment. She settled back into her chair with the air of someone granting a temporary reprieve. Why would I do that? Because everyone needs someone to talk to them straight occasionally, even billionaire CEOs. Robert signaled the nervous young server, who approached their table like he was defusing a bomb. We'll both have the special whatever wine you'd recommend with it, and maybe start with some of that artisan bread I saw going to other tables. The server nodded, retreating with visible relief. Patricia studied Robert with the focused intensity he'd seen in engineers examining structural blueprints, looking for weaknesses and load-bearing points. You're remarkably comfortable telling a stranger what to do. Not telling, suggesting. There's a difference. Robert unfolded his napkin with deliberate casualness. And you're not a stranger. I know exactly who you are. Sterling Security Tech owns the Riverside Commercial Complex where I work as head of building systems maintenance, which makes you, technically, my employer's employer. That information registered across Patricia's features: surprise, calculation, reassessment. She'd walked into this restaurant expecting to command and control, and instead found herself in conversation with someone who knew more about her than she'd anticipated and refused to be intimidated by the knowledge. So this evening becomes even more inappropriate. Employee fraternization policies exist for good reasons. We're not fraternizing. We're having dinner because of a scheduling error. Nothing inappropriate about two professionals sharing a meal. The server returned with wine, pouring with hands that shook slightly less now. Patricia took a sip and Robert watched her face shift through micro-expressions too fast to fully catalog. When she set down the glass, something in her posture had relaxed by perhaps 5%. "Tell me, Mr. Williams, why did you really challenge me about the service workers?" The question carried genuine curiosity beneath its confrontational surface. Robert considered his answer carefully, knowing that authenticity was the only currency that might buy him credibility with someone who'd spent decades navigating corporate deception. "My late wife worked as a waitress when we first met. I watched people treat her like furniture for years. She'd come home exhausted, not just from the physical work, but from being invisible to everyone who mattered. Then one day someone would actually see her, acknowledge her as a human being, and she'd light up like it was the most precious gift she'd ever received." He met Patricia's eyes. "When she got sick, when we lost everything to medical bills and I had to take whatever work I could find to keep our daughter fed and housed, I made her a promise. I'd never stand by and watch people be diminished like that. Not if I had any power to intervene." The raw honesty seemed to land somewhere behind Patricia's carefully constructed defenses. Her expression didn't soften exactly, but something shifted. A recognition of pain acknowledged, if not fully shared. "Your wife, past tense. Cancer, 4 years ago. Emily was 5. The words still carried weight, still hurt, but Robert had learned to carry grief without letting it crush him. "We had insurance through my job, but it wasn't enough. Nothing was enough." Patricia's fingers traced the stem of her wine glass, the gesture almost unconscious. "I'm sorry for your loss." The words sounded genuine, stripped of the social performance that usually accompanied such expressions. Children shouldn't have to lose their mothers that young. No, they shouldn't. Robert accepted the bread basket from the server with a quiet thank you that made the young man straighten slightly. Dignity recognized and returned. But life doesn't ask what's fair. It just keeps moving forward, and you either find a way to move with it or get left behind. Their meals arrived, perfectly plated, artistically arranged, the kind of food that prioritized presentation over portion size. Robert suppressed a smile, thinking of the simple pasta dishes he made for Emily, substance over style every time. But he had to admit, the first bite justified the restaurant's reputation. Patricia ate with the same controlled precision she brought to everything else, but Robert noticed her gaze kept returning to him, as if trying to solve an equation that refused to balance. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Deference, resentment, the usual responses from people in your position when confronted with someone in mine." She set down her fork with deliberate care. "Instead, you challenge me in public, then invite me to dinner as though we're equals." "We are equals, different jobs, different bank accounts, different responsibilities, but fundamentally, two people trying to navigate life with whatever tools we've got." Robert took a sip of wine, letting the expensive vintage sit on his tongue before swallowing. "Money doesn't make someone worthy. How you treat people when you have power, that shows who you really are." The words hung between them, and Robert saw them land with unexpected force. Patricia's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something raw underneath. Loneliness maybe, or exhaustion, or the accumulated weight of years spent trusting no one. "That's remarkably naive." "Is it? Or is it just inconvenient for people who've built their entire identity around believing otherwise?" Patricia's laugh came sharp and unexpected, genuine amusement breaking through her controlled exterior. "You have no idea who you're talking to, do you? Not really. You know the public face, the Forbes profile, the corporate success story. You don't know anything about what it cost to build that." So tell me. Robert leaned back, giving her space. We've got time. The food's good, and I'm guessing you don't often get to talk to someone who doesn't want something from you. The observation seemed to strike home. Patricia was quiet for a long moment, internal calculations playing out behind her eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice carried less edge, more weight. My first company was a startup I founded with my college boyfriend and 2 classmates. We developed revolutionary encryption algorithms together, worked 18-hour days in a garage, believed we were building something that would change the world. She paused, and Robert saw genuine pain flicker across her features. The night before our first major pitch to venture capitalists, my boyfriend copied all our code, transferred company funds to a private account, and disappeared. He resurfaced 6 months later as the CTO of a competitor using technology with suspicious similarities to our work. That's a profound betrayal. It taught me what trust actually costs, what it means to let people close enough to destroy you. Patricia's fingers tightened around her wine glass. I rebuilt from nothing, did it alone, made sure I never needed anyone enough to be vulnerable again. And I built something bigger, better, more successful than anything he could have imagined. Robert heard the triumph in her voice, but also the hollowness underneath. Victory purchased at the cost of every genuine connection. Success measured in isolation. But you're still carrying it, still letting that one person's choice define how you treat everyone else. You say that like it's a weakness. I say it like it's a loss. Different thing. Robert finished his wine, let the server refill both glasses. When Catherine was dying, she made me promise I wouldn't let grief make me mean. Wouldn't use her death as an excuse to shut out the world and wrap myself in anger. She said people who survive loss have 2 choices. Become harder or become kinder. One path makes you invulnerable. The other keeps you human. Patricia stared at him with an intensity that felt like standing under stage lights. And which path did you choose? Still choosing, every day. It's not a one-time decision. Robert thought of Emily, asleep in their small apartment, trusting that her father would build a world worth inheriting. Some days it's easier than others, but I've got a 9-year-old daughter watching everything I do, learning what kind of person to become. I need her to see that suffering doesn't have to make you cruel. The server approached to clear their plates, and Patricia surprised Robert by thanking him directly, making eye contact, treating him like a person rather than an automated service delivery system. The young man's face lit up with the same grateful recognition Robert had seen on Catherine's face years ago. After the server departed, Patricia leaned forward slightly, guard lowering by increments. Your daughter, Emily? Yeah, smart as hell, curious about everything. Can't decide if she wants to be an astronaut or an artist when she grows up. Loves building things almost as much as she loves drawing them. Pride warmed Robert's voice despite his best efforts to remain neutral. She's got her mother's eyes and her ability to see connections between things that seem completely unrelated. Teachers say she's gifted, but they also say she asks too many questions that don't have easy answers. Sounds like someone who could go far with the right opportunities. She'll go far regardless. We might not have the resources other families do, but we've got something more important. She knows she's loved unconditionally, knows her worth isn't tied to achievements or acquisitions. Robert met Patricia's gaze. That foundation matters more than any private school or expensive tutors. Patricia's expression shifted again, something wistful crossing her features before disappearing behind her practiced composure. You're raising her well. I'm doing my best. That's all any parent can do. They finished their meal in surprising companionship, conversation flowing easier than either had anticipated. Patricia shared carefully edited stories from Sterling Tech's early days, the impossible deadlines and technical challenges that had defined her rise. Robert described the satisfaction of solving complex building systems problems. The quiet pride of preventing catastrophic failures that most people would never know almost happened. When the server brought the check, Patricia intercepted it with practiced efficiency that brooked no argument. Robert started to protest, but she cut him off with a look. Consider it compensation for the conversation. Genuine honesty is rare enough to be worth paying for. She pulled a business card from her jacket pocket, wrote something on the back with a pen that probably cost more than Robert's monthly grocery budget. Sterling Tech is hosting a charity gala this Saturday at the Harrington Hotel. Scholarship fund for disadvantaged students pursuing technical education. You should attend. The invitation was delivered as a statement rather than a question, the kind of directive Patricia was clearly accustomed to having followed without debate. Robert studied the card, turning it over in his calloused fingers. I appreciate the thought, but I don't have a tuxedo gathering dust in my closet, and I'd need to find childcare for Emily. Patricia seemed momentarily thrown by practical obstacles that her wealth usually eliminated before they could manifest as problems. The company can provide appropriate attire. As for your daughter, bring her. There will be other children present, and the event specifically supports education. It would be appropriate for her to attend and see the importance of philanthropy firsthand. Robert recognized the invitation as significant, coming from someone who clearly maintained careful boundaries around her professional and personal life. After a moment's consideration, he nodded. Thank you. We'd be honored to attend. Patricia extended her hand for a formal handshake, and Robert noticed that despite her polished appearance and evident wealth, her grip was firm and unpretentious. It was an unexpected pleasure meeting you, Robert Williams. I'll have my assistant send details about the gala. Likewise, Ms. Montgomery. Patricia. The slight softening in her expression suggested the evening had affected her in ways neither of them had anticipated. As Patricia's sleek black car pulled away from the restaurant, Robert stood on the sidewalk trying to process the strange turn his evening had taken. What had begun as a straightforward business meeting arranged by Jason had somehow transformed into an unexpected encounter with one of Boston's most powerful and notoriously difficult business figures, who happened to own the building where he worked and who had now invited him and Emily to a high society charity function. The drive home took Robert through neighborhoods that transformed gradually from the gleaming wealth of downtown Boston to the more practical, lived-in areas where working families made their homes. Each mile represented a social and economic boundary that people like Patricia Montgomery rarely crossed, while Robert navigated these transitions daily, belonging fully to neither world. When he arrived at their apartment building in East Boston, Mrs. Chen from downstairs, no relation to anyone Robert worked with, just a kind elderly neighbor who helped with childcare, reported that Emily had finished her homework and fallen asleep while waiting up for him. Robert found his daughter curled on the couch, drawing pad clutched in her small hands, pencil marks smudging her cheek. He carefully lifted her, noting how she grew a little heavier each year, and carried her to the bedroom with its glow-in-the-dark stars stuck carefully to the ceiling. Emily stirred slightly as he tucked her in, Catherine's old blanket pulled up to her chin. Dad? Her voice was sleepy, barely conscious. Right here, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. How was your meeting? Interesting. Different than expected. We'll talk about it in the morning. Emily's eyes drifted closed again, and Robert stood there for a moment watching her breathe, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility that had defined his life since Catherine's death. Every decision he made rippled outward to affect this small person who trusted him completely, who believed without question that he would build a world worth inheriting. After paying Mrs. Chen and thanking her for watching Emily, Robert sat at their small kitchen table, still wearing his good shirt from the unusual dinner meeting. The contrast between Patricia Montgomery's world and his own couldn't have been more stark. Yet something about their interaction had felt strangely genuine despite their different circumstances, as though they'd managed to connect across the vast divide of wealth and class through simple human recognition. His phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender was Jennifer Parker, executive assistant to Patricia Montgomery, and the subject line read simply, "Gala details, confidential." The formality of the communication reminded Robert of the significant social gap between his world and Patricia's, making him question the wisdom of accepting the invitation. The email detailed arrangements with mathematical precision. Car service, tuxedo fitting appointment suggested arrival time. Everything organized with the kind of efficiency that money bought, eliminating obstacles before they could manifest as problems. Robert opened his laptop, curiosity overcoming caution, and searched for Patricia Montgomery. The results painted a portrait of relentless success built on calculated ruthlessness. Hostile takeovers, crushed competitors, a reputation for demanding perfection and accepting nothing less. But buried in the search results, he found something else. An article from 2 years ago, barely noticed in the business press. Sterling Tech considers maintenance outsourcing for commercial properties. His stomach tightened as he clicked through to the full story. The details were vague, corporate speak about efficiency and cost optimization, but the implications were clear. Sterling Security Tech was evaluating whether to eliminate in-house maintenance teams across all their properties in favor of cheaper third-party contractors. The Riverside complex was specifically mentioned as a target property. Robert sat back, mind racing through possibilities. Was tonight's chance encounter actually chance? Had Patricia engineered the meeting somehow, softening him up before dropping news that would eliminate his job and those of everyone on his team? The timing seemed too convenient, the invitation to the gala too calculated, but then he remembered the genuine surprise in her eyes when he'd challenged her. The unguarded moments when her mask had slipped and revealed something vulnerable underneath. Those reactions felt authentic, not performed. Unless she was a better actor than seemed likely, Patricia Montgomery had been as surprised by their encounter as he was. His phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. "Robert, this is Patricia. Jennifer will contact you with gala arrangements. Looking forward to Saturday. PM." The message was brief, professional, but carried an undercurrent of something more personal. Robert stared at it, weighing his response. He could back out now, protect himself and his team from whatever corporate maneuvering might be unfolding. Or he could trust the connection he'd felt during dinner, believe that sometimes people were exactly who they appeared to be in unguarded moments. He typed a reply, "Looking forward to it as well. Emily will be excited. Thanks again for dinner. RW." The response came almost immediately. "Thank you for the honesty. It's rare." Robert set down his phone and looked around their modest apartment. Photos of Catherine smiled from carefully positioned frames, maintaining her presence in their lives 4 years after cancer had taken her. Emily's drawings covered the refrigerator, colorful evidence of a child's creative spirit nurtured despite limited resources. The space wasn't much, but Robert had worked hard to make it a warm, stable home. Whatever happened next with Patricia Montgomery and her corporate decisions, Robert knew his responsibility remained unchanged. Protect his daughter, do right by his team, maintain the integrity Catherine had helped him build. If Patricia's interest was genuine, they'd find a way forward. If it was manipulation, he'd face that when it became clear. But as he prepared for bed, Robert couldn't shake the memory of Patricia's face when she'd talked about her first company's betrayal. The loneliness that haunted her despite her billions. The momentary recognition that success purchased at the cost of every genuine connection might not be success at all. The next morning arrived with the familiar chaos of school preparation. Emily chattered excitedly as Robert made her lunch, wanting to know everything about the business meeting that had kept him out so late. Was it boring? Did you have to wear a tie? Did they serve fancy food with tiny portions like on those cooking shows? Robert smiled, arranging her sandwich precisely the way she preferred, crusts removed. It was interesting. The person I met was different than I expected, and actually I need to talk to you about something. He crouched to her level, meeting her eyes. We've been invited to a fancy party this Saturday night. A charity event that raises money to help kids go to school. Emily's excitement was immediate, her spoon pausing halfway to her mouth. A party? Like Cinderella at the ball? Do I need a princess dress? Not exactly a princess dress, but you could wear your special occasion dress from Aunt Judy, the blue one with the silver sparkles. The one from her wedding. Can I really? Will there be dancing? Will there be other kids? Robert laughed, grateful for his daughter's uncomplicated enthusiasm. I think there will be other kids there, yes, and probably dancing. The lady who invited us said it would be good for you to see how people help others with their resources. What lady? Her name is Patricia Montgomery. She owns the company that owns the building where I work. Emily processed this information with the seriousness she brought to all matters of social hierarchy. So she's like your boss's boss's boss? Something like that. Is she nice? Robert considered the question, remembering Patricia's cold dismissal of restaurant staff followed by her gradual thawing as dinner progressed. I think she's complicated. She's had some hard things happen that made her build walls around herself. But underneath, I think there's someone who wants to be kind, but has forgotten how. Emily nodded with the wisdom of children who understood emotional dynamics intuitively. Like the Ice Queen in that story Mom used to read, she seemed mean, but she was really just lonely and scared. The observation struck Robert with its accuracy. Catherine had always said Emily had a gift for seeing past surface behaviors to underlying emotions, a sensitivity that could be both blessing and burden as she grew older. After dropping Emily at school, Robert arrived at the Riverside Commercial Complex for his regular shift. The building was a 15-story glass and steel structure housing various businesses from law firms to tech startups. As head of maintenance, Robert supervised a team of 5 technicians responsible for everything from HVAC systems to security infrastructure. His morning routine typically included reviewing overnight maintenance logs, assigning daily tasks to his team, and addressing any urgent repair requests from tenants. Today, however, his thoughts kept returning to the previous evening's unexpected dinner and Patricia Montgomery's surprising invitation. Michael Anderson, Robert's assistant supervisor and closest friend on the maintenance team, was waiting in their shared office with barely contained curiosity. Earth to Williams. You've been staring at that work order for 5 minutes without moving. Something wrong with the Johnson account? Robert shook his head, refocusing on the paperwork in front of him. Sorry, just distracted, had an unusual evening. Michael raised an eyebrow, leaning against the doorframe. At 52, Michael had 20 years of building systems experience and had become both mentor and friend to Robert when he'd first started at Riverside. Unusual how? Bennett set you up with some corporate bigwig who wants to poach you for twice the salary? Because if so, remember who taught you everything you know about commercial HVAC? Robert laughed, appreciating Michael's ability to lighten his mood. Nothing like that. Actually, I ended up having dinner with Patricia Montgomery. Michael's casual posture stiffened immediately. Patricia Montgomery, as in owns this building, eats small companies for breakfast. Patricia Montgomery, how the hell did that happen? As Robert explained the mix-up with reservations and the unexpected dinner conversation, Michael's expression shifted from shock to concern. Robert, be careful there. People like that don't suddenly become friends with maintenance managers. There's always an angle. It wasn't like that, Robert insisted, though part of him acknowledged the wisdom in Michael's caution. She was difficult at first, but there was something genuine underneath all the corporate armor. Michael shook his head skeptically. I've been in this business long enough to know the ultra-rich might play at being regular folks occasionally, but they don't cross class lines without a reason. Just watch yourself. The morning passed with routine maintenance tasks. A malfunctioning climate control system on the 8th floor, a persistent leak in the executive washrooms, routine inspection of the building's backup generators. But at lunch, Robert finally opened the full email from Jennifer Parker. The message was detailed and efficient, explaining that a car would pick up Robert and Emily at their apartment at 6 p.m. Saturday, and that a representative from a formal wear shop would contact Robert to arrange measurements for appropriate attire. The email concluded with a note that all expenses were covered by Sterling Tech as part of the company's commitment to the charity event. The thoroughness of the arrangements made Robert uncomfortable. On one hand, it was a generous gesture that solved the practical problems he'd mentioned. On the other hand, it emphasized the power imbalance between them and created a sense of obligation that made him uneasy. He'd always made his own way in life, and accepting such extensive assistance felt dangerously close to dependency. His phone buzzed with another message, this time from Jason Bennett. "Hey man, sorry again about last night's screw-up. Heard you ended up dining with Patricia Montgomery herself. That's either really good luck or really dangerous. Call me when you can. Need to give you context about what you might be walking into." Robert stepped outside the building to make the call, finding a quiet spot near the loading dock where delivery trucks wouldn't interrupt. Jason picked up on the first ring. "Robert, tell me everything." "Not much to tell. Reservation got mixed up, we ended up at the same table, had dinner, talked. She invited me and Emily to a charity gala on Saturday." Jason's silence stretched long enough to be concerning. "Robert, you need to know something. Sterling Tech is evaluating major operational changes across all their properties. Word in the consulting circles is they're seriously considering outsourcing all maintenance operations. That includes Riverside." The confirmation of what Robert had already discovered hit harder coming from someone he trusted. "When were you going to mention this?" "I didn't know if it would actually happen. Companies float these ideas all the time and never follow through. But if Patricia Montgomery is suddenly taking personal interest in you, in your work, in your family, that's not random. She's either gathering intel or managing potential pushback." Robert leaned against the brick wall, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility for his team settle heavier on his shoulders. Or maybe she's just a person who had an interesting conversation with someone who treated her like a human being instead of a walking bank account. Maybe. Jason didn't sound convinced. But maybe she's also a CEO who's built a billion-dollar empire by being 10 steps ahead of everyone else. Don't let your guard down just because she was charming over dinner. After the call ended, Robert stood in the afternoon sunlight weighing competing instincts. His experience told him to protect himself and his team, to treat every interaction with someone of Patricia's wealth and power as potentially dangerous. But his instincts, the same ones that had guided him through grief and single parenthood, insisted that something genuine had happened during that dinner. Some moment of authentic human connection that transcended their different circumstances. The rest of the workday passed in a blur of mechanical tasks and mounting uncertainty. Robert's team noticed his distraction, throwing concerned glances his way during the afternoon briefing. Michael pulled him aside after the meeting, voice low and urgent. "Whatever's going on with you and Montgomery, the guys are worried. There's rumors floating around about outsourcing, about changes coming down from corporate. They need to know you've got their backs." "I've always got their backs. That hasn't changed." "Then maybe you need to show them that, because right now it looks like you're getting cozy with the person who might eliminate all our jobs." The accusation stung because it carried a grain of truth. Robert had been so focused on his own confusion about Patricia that he'd failed to consider how his team might perceive the situation. "I'll talk to them tomorrow morning. Full transparency about what I know and what I don't." Michael nodded, satisfied for the moment, but the concern in his eyes remained. That evening, after picking up Emily from school and helping her with homework, Robert found himself staring at his laptop again, searching for more information about Patricia Montgomery and Sterling Tech's corporate strategies. The picture that emerged was complex, a company built on innovation and aggressive expansion, but also one facing pressure from shareholders to maximize profits and minimize operational costs. Outsourcing maintenance would fit perfectly into that mandate, eliminating union wages and benefit obligations in favor of cheaper contract labor. Emily appeared at his elbow, drawing pad in hand, studying his troubled expression with the perceptiveness that sometimes seemed beyond her years. "You're worried about something. Just work stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about. Is it about the fancy party? Do you not want to go?" Robert pulled her onto his lap, grateful for her simple directness. "I want to go. I'm just not sure what it means. The lady who invited us, Ms. Montgomery, she has the power to make decisions that would affect a lot of people I care about, including the guys I work with, and I'm not sure if she's being friendly because she genuinely likes us, or because she wants something." Emily considered this with characteristic seriousness. "Mom used to say you can tell what people really want by watching what they do when they think nobody's watching." The wisdom, delivered in Catherine's words through their daughter's voice, hit Robert with unexpected force. She was right. The moments that had felt most genuine during dinner were precisely those when Patricia had dropped her guard, when she'd responded to something honestly before her corporate training could reassert control. "Your mom was a smart woman. So we should go to the party and watch what Miss Montgomery does when she thinks we're not watching?" Robert smiled despite his concerns. "Something like that. Though maybe we should also just enjoy the party and see what happens. Not everything has to be complicated." Emily nodded, satisfied, and returned to her drawing. Robert looked at the screen again, at the articles analyzing Sterling Tech's corporate moves with cold precision, and made a decision. He would attend the gala, would bring Emily, would give Patricia Montgomery the benefit of doubt she'd earned during their dinner. But he'd also keep his eyes open, watch for the truth that revealed itself in unguarded moments, and protect his team regardless of personal cost. His phone buzzed with a final message for the evening. "Patricia again. Looking forward to introducing Emily to some of the scholarship students on Saturday. I think she'll find their projects fascinating. Sleep well. P.M." The message was thoughtful, personal in a way that corporate calculation rarely achieved. Robert typed a reply. "She's been talking about it non-stop since I told her. Thank you for thinking of her. R.W." As Robert prepared for bed, checking on Emily one final time before turning off his own light, he thought about Catherine's wisdom regarding choices. When confronted with loss, with betrayal, with the fundamental unfairness of existence, people chose to become harder or kinder. Patricia had clearly chosen hardness after her first company's collapse, building walls that protected her from future betrayal but also isolated her from genuine connection. Robert had chosen differently, or tried to, though some days the choice felt impossible. But watching Emily sleep peacefully, trusting completely in her father's ability to build a good world, he knew Catherine had been right. Hardness might offer protection, but kindness offered something infinitely more valuable, the possibility of remaining human through whatever storms life delivered. Saturday would reveal which path Patricia Montgomery was truly walking, whether her invitation represented genuine connection or corporate calculation. Either way, Robert would face it with the same integrity Catherine had helped him build, protecting what mattered while remaining open to unexpected possibilities. The apartment settled into familiar nighttime quiet, and Robert finally allowed himself to sleep, trusting that whatever came next, he'd find a way to navigate it without losing himself or the people who depended on him. Saturday evening arrived with crystalline autumn air settling over Boston, the kind of perfect weather that made the city's historic architecture seem to glow from within. Robert stood before the bathroom mirror, adjusting his bow tie for the fourth time. Hands that could disassemble complex HVAC systems with precision fumbling with the simple strip of black fabric. The tuxedo fit perfectly. The formal wear representative had been thorough during his apartment visit Thursday afternoon, but wearing it felt like inhabiting someone else's skin. Emily appeared in the doorway, her special occasion dress shimmering under the overhead light. The blue fabric caught hints of silver as she moved, and her hair had been arranged in an elaborate braid, courtesy of Mrs. Chen's patient expertise. The transformation from his everyday daughter to this poised young person ready for high society made Robert's chest tighten with bittersweet pride. "Dad, the fancy car is here." Her voice carried barely contained excitement. "It's so shiny I can see my reflection in the door." Robert abandoned the bow tie, accepting that slightly imperfect would have to suffice, and joined Emily at the living room window. The black town car idled at the curb, its sleek presence drawing curious stares from neighbors. Mr. Kowalski from 3B had paused his evening cigarette to openly gape. The Hernandez kids pressed their faces against their apartment window like they were witnessing a celebrity sighting. Emily twirled once, testing the dress's movement potential. "Do I look okay? Like I belong at a fancy party?" Robert knelt to her level, adjusting the small pendant Catherine had given her on her 5th birthday. "You look beautiful, just like your mom." The familiar ache bloomed and faded. "But remember what we talked about. This is a different world than ours, and that's okay. We're guests, not performers. Just be yourself." Mom used to say being yourself is the only thing worth being anyway. The driver, a professional man in his mid-50s who introduced himself simply as Thomas, treated Emily with formal courtesy that delighted her. He opened the rear door with a slight bow that made her giggle, then ensured they were settled before pulling smoothly into evening traffic. Robert noticed the small cooler tucked discreetly beside Emily's seat, stocked with juice boxes, specifically the apple variety she preferred. Someone had done their homework. The attention to detail was either thoughtful or calculating, possibly both. As the car navigated toward downtown, Emily's face pressed against the window, watching familiar neighborhoods transform into progressively more affluent territories. The modest triple-deckers and corner markets of East Boston gave way to brownstones and boutique shops. Then finally to the gleaming towers and historic hotels that defined the city's expensive heart. Each mile represented social boundaries that most people never crossed in either direction. The Harrington Hotel rose from its block like a limestone monument to Gilded Age excess. Its facade illuminated by strategic lighting that emphasized architectural grandeur without modern gaudiness. A line of luxury vehicles deposited guests at the entrance where uniformed staff directed them through massive doors into a world Robert had only glimpsed in movies. Emily's hand found his automatically, her earlier confidence yielding to appropriate awe at the sheer scale of wealth on display. Women glided past in gowns that cost more than Robert's annual mortgage payments, accompanied by men whose tuxedos fit with the ease of frequent wear. Conversations referenced vacation homes in St. Bart's, prep schools in Connecticut, business deals involving sums that could have funded Robert's entire department for years. Robert leaned down, voice low enough for only Emily to hear. "Remember what I told you. Money doesn't make people better or worse. It just gives them more opportunities to show who they really are." Emily nodded, her grip loosening slightly as curiosity began overriding intimidation. They followed the crowd into the grand ballroom, and whatever Emily had imagined based on her storybooks, the reality exceeded it. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks from a ceiling painted with classical scenes. Elaborate floral arrangements occupied strategic positions, their blooms probably representing someone's weekly salary each. A string quartet played something elegant and unfamiliar, the music weaving through conversations and laughter with practiced invisibility. Emily's whisper carried farther than she intended, her 9-year-old volume control failing under excitement. "Dad, that lady's necklace has diamonds bigger than my entire marble collection." The woman in question, elderly and draped in family heirlooms, turned with an expression that could have been disapproval but softened at Emily's genuine wonder. She smiled, and the tension Robert hadn't realized he was carrying eased fractionally. Jennifer Parker materialized from the crowd with the efficiency of someone intimately familiar with managing Patricia Montgomery's social obligations. In person, she was younger than Robert had expected from their email exchanges, probably early 30s, with an air of calm competence that explained how she survived working for someone as demanding as Patricia. "Mr. Williams, Emily, I'm Jennifer Parker, Ms. Montgomery's assistant. She asked me to look after you until she's finished with some board members who cornered her near the entrance." Her smile seemed genuine rather than professionally manufactured. "May I show you to your table and get you something to drink?" As Jennifer led them through the crowd, Robert noticed the subtle glances their presence attracted. His rented tuxedo, while well-made, lacked the bespoke quality that distinguished other male guests' attire. Emily's department store dress, though lovely, was noticeably simpler than the designer children's wear adorning the few other young attendees. They were clearly outsiders, and everyone present could read that status instantly. Their assigned table positioned them surprisingly close to the front of the room, already occupied by three couples whose conversation halted abruptly as Jennifer made introductions. The awkward silence stretched until Emily, spotting the elaborate centerpiece, broke it with characteristic directness. "Look, Dad, those flowers are just like the ones in the book Mom used to read about the secret garden." One of the women, perhaps 45, with softness in her eyes that contrasted with her formal demeanor, smiled genuinely. "You have excellent taste, young lady. They're English roses, specifically Graham Thomas varieties. Do you like gardens?" Emily launched into enthusiastic description of their modest container garden on the apartment balcony, completely unaware of the social gulf she was bridging through simple conversation. The woman, Margaret Foster, wife of a venture capitalist, engaged with Emily's chatter with apparent genuine interest, creating unexpected warmth at their corner of the table. Robert fielded polite but slightly condescending questions from one of the men about what exactly maintenance supervision entailed, the subtext clear. "What are you doing here among your betters?" He was formulating a response that balanced honesty with diplomacy when a subtle shift in the room's energy announced Patricia's approach. She moved through this crowd with practiced grace, acknowledging greetings with efficient charm, while maintaining clear trajectory toward their table. Patricia Montgomery in her element was even more impressive than she'd been at the restaurant. Her gown, deep midnight blue that appeared almost black until she moved and caught the light, was elegantly simple in a way that screamed exclusive designer workmanship. A single strand of sapphires at her throat provided the only adornment, their color matching her eyes with precision that seemed too perfect to be accidental. "Robert." Her greeting carried surprising warmth as she extended her hand. "I'm pleased you could make it." Her gaze shifted to Emily, and something in her expression softened momentarily. "And you must be Emily. Your father has told me about your interest in both science and art." Emily, momentarily awed into unusual shyness, found her voice after a beat. "Thank you for inviting us, Ms. Montgomery. Your party is very fancy." A hint of genuine amusement touched Patricia's lips. "Yes, rather unnecessarily so, but it encourages people to donate more generously when they're surrounded by luxury." She turned to address the table at large. "I see you've met some of our board members and supporters." The subtle shift in the other guests' demeanor at Patricia's clear indication that Robert and Emily were her personal invitees rather than random charity cases was almost comical. Suddenly, the venture capitalist who'd been questioning Robert about maintenance supervision with barely concealed condescension wanted his thoughts on building efficiency systems and sustainable operation models. As formal dinner service began, Emily's careful practice with Mrs. Chen proved invaluable as she navigated multiple courses and place settings with adorable concentration. Robert noted with appreciation that Patricia occasionally guided Emily with subtle gestures when a particularly obscure piece of silverware presented itself, but did so without drawing attention or embarrassing her. The conversation flowed more easily than Robert had anticipated, largely because Patricia skillfully directed topics toward areas where his practical expertise gave him solid footing even among people with multiple advanced degrees and generations of wealth. When discussion turned to sustainable building practices, Robert found himself explaining real-world applications and limitations of theoretical models that the academics and investors at the table had only encountered in presentations. "The problem with most building efficiency consultants," Robert heard himself saying, warming to familiar territory, "is that they design systems in isolation without considering how they interact in actual daily operation. You can have the most advanced HVAC system in the world, but if it's fighting with your automated lighting and occupancy-based temperature controls, you're wasting energy and reducing equipment lifespan." Patricia watched him with evident interest as he used water glasses and salt shakers to demonstrate how different systems could be integrated more effectively. "This is exactly why hands-on expertise is invaluable." Her remark was directed to the venture capitalist. "All the business theory in the world can't replace someone who understands how things actually work." Emily, who'd been quietly observing the adults while carefully eating her dessert, suddenly spoke up with the bluntness only children could achieve. "That's what Dad always says. He says the people who really keep things running aren't usually the ones in the fancy offices." A moment of uncomfortable silence followed as the implications of Emily's innocent comment registered across the table. Patricia, however, laughed with what appeared to be genuine amusement rather than polite deflection. "Your father is absolutely right, Emily, and smart companies recognize that." As dinner concluded and the formal program began, Robert found himself surprisingly engaged in the Foundation's presentation about technical education opportunities for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The statistics about declining skilled trades workers and the growing gap between academic credentials and practical workplace needs reflected his own observations from years in the field. This wasn't abstract charity. It addressed real problems with tangible solutions. During a break in the program, as guests circulated before the fundraising auction, Patricia guided Robert and Emily toward a quieter area where scholarship recipients were displaying their technical projects. Emily was immediately drawn to a young woman demonstrating a robot she'd built that could sort recyclable materials using optical sensors. "This is precisely why I support this particular foundation." Patricia's voice carried conviction rather than performance. "Traditional academic paths aren't right for everyone, and we're facing critical shortages in skilled technical workers because we've devalued practical education." Robert studied her with renewed interest, seeing past the corporate armor to something more complex underneath. "That's not the perspective I'd expect from someone in your position." Patricia's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. "Because wealthy executives typically favor elite universities and MBA programs?" A pause. "I built my first company from skills I taught myself in a garage, not from my business degree. The degree opened doors, but the practical knowledge made me successful." Before Robert could respond, they were interrupted by a tall, immaculately dressed man whose superficial smile didn't reach his calculating eyes. He radiated the kind of corporate authority that came from years of financial power rather than actual accomplishment. "Patricia, there you are. The Westridge Group is looking for you regarding their pledge amount." His gaze shifted to Robert with barely concealed assessment and instant dismissal. "I don't believe we've met." Patricia's response carried professional courtesy that lacked her earlier warmth. "Richard Hayes, my CFO. Richard, this is Robert Williams, head of Building Systems Maintenance at Riverside." Richard's handshake was perfunctory, his attention already shifting back to Patricia. "Maintenance? How interesting." The tone suggested it was anything but. "Patricia, when you have a moment, we should discuss the operational restructuring proposal. The preliminary numbers are very promising." The phrase operational restructuring sent ice through Robert's veins, immediately connecting to the outsourcing news he'd discovered days earlier. Patricia's expression revealed nothing as she nodded professionally. We'll discuss it Monday, Richard. Tonight is about the foundation. As Richard departed with obvious reluctance, Robert caught the calculated glance he directed back toward them, eyes narrowing slightly as he observed their interaction. The moment crystallized Robert's earlier concerns, transforming vague suspicion into concrete wariness. Your CFO seems very focused on business, even at a charity event. Patricia's response was carefully measured. Richard is extremely effective at what he does. Maximizing efficiency and profitability is literally his job. She paused, studying Robert's expression with the analytical precision he was coming to recognize. But you're concerned about something specific. Robert hesitated, weighing professional caution against directness. Before he could decide, Emily returned from the student exhibition, bubbling with excitement about the recycling robot and completely transforming the tenor of their exchange. Patricia engaged with Emily's enthusiasm, asking perceptive questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than adult condescension. The remainder of the evening proceeded with a complex undercurrent Robert couldn't quite decipher. Patricia introduced them to various business leaders and philanthropists, consistently presenting Robert as someone whose practical expertise she valued rather than as a curiosity or charity case. Yet he couldn't shake the discomfort from Richard Hayes's comment about operational restructuring, nor the calculating looks the CFO continued to direct toward them throughout the evening. The man was clearly measuring something, evaluating Robert's presence for implications Robert couldn't fully grasp. As the event began winding down, Emily's energy finally flagged, her excitement giving way to natural fatigue. Patricia, noticing her stifled yawns, smoothly arranged for their car to be brought around early without making Emily feel like she was being treated as a child needing special accommodation. "I'd like to show Emily something before you leave." Patricia led them toward a quiet corridor off the main ballroom where photographs documented the foundation's work. "These are previous scholarship recipients. Many of them now have successful careers in fields they were told weren't meant for people from their backgrounds." Emily studied the photos with genuine interest, particularly one showing a young woman operating complex HVAC equipment. "She's doing Dad's job." Patricia's correction came gently. "Actually, she designed that system. She came from a neighborhood where most people didn't finish high school, but she had a talent for understanding how things work. The foundation helped her get training, and now she creates environmental control systems for hospital operating rooms." Robert watched this interaction with growing confusion. The Patricia showing such thoughtfulness toward his daughter seemed fundamentally different from the cold business executive who might be planning to eliminate his team's dig, or the demanding customer who'd initially treated restaurant staff with dismissive arrogance. Which version was authentic? As they waited for their car, Patricia addressed Emily directly. "Would you like to visit Sterling Tech's engineering lab sometime? We have some projects involving art and science together that might interest you." Emily's tired eyes widened with renewed excitement. "Really? Could I see the robots?" "We do have several robotics projects," Patricia confirmed with a hint of genuine smile. "Perhaps next Thursday afternoon. I believe that's an early dismissal day for your school." Robert was surprised both by the invitation and by Patricia's knowledge of Emily's school schedule. Jennifer's research had clearly been thorough, which was either impressive or unsettling depending on motivation. "That's very generous." Patricia's response came with unexpected candor. "It's entirely selfish. Your daughter asked better questions about our technology than most of my executive team." When their car arrived, Emily thanked Patricia with the natural grace of a child, unburdened by adult complexities. As Robert moved to follow his daughter into the vehicle, Patricia touched his arm lightly. "Robert, about what Richard mentioned, operational restructuring, it's not what you might be thinking. We should discuss it, but not here. Perhaps lunch next week?" The ambiguity of her statement did little to resolve Robert's concerns, but he nodded agreement, unwilling to create a scene that might affect Emily's overwhelmingly positive experience. Thank you for including us tonight. Emily will remember this for a long time. Patricia's expression softened fractionally. Your daughter is remarkable. She's being raised with the right values. The compliment, delivered without artifice, seemed to surprise Patricia herself, as though she hadn't intended to reveal so genuine an opinion. As their car pulled away from the Harringtons' glittering facade, Emily leaned against Robert's shoulder, recounting favorite moments with fading energy. Within minutes, she was asleep, trusting completely in her father's ability to navigate whatever complexities the evening had introduced. Robert's phone buzzed with a text as they crossed into East Boston. Patricia, looking forward to showing Emily the labs Thursday. Thank you for coming tonight. Sleep well. PM. He typed a reply with one hand, careful not to disturb Emily. She hasn't stopped talking about it. Thank you for thinking of her. R.W. Sunday morning arrived too early, Emily's excitement overriding her usual weekend sleep schedule. Over pancakes, she recounted every detail of the gala with the precision of someone cataloging treasure. Robert listened, making appropriate sounds of interest, while his mind churned through the previous evening's implications. At 7 p.m., he left Emily with Mrs. Chen and drove to Morton's Cafe in Cambridge, a deliberately neutral location far from both Sterling Tech's corporate headquarters and the Riverside complex. Patricia arrived precisely on time, but the transformation from Saturday's elegant CEO to this person made Robert pause. Jeans, simple sweater, hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Without the trappings of wealth and power, she looked almost approachable, still elegant but human in a way her business persona rarely allowed. She slid into the booth across from him, and Robert noticed the tension in her usually composed features, the shadows under her eyes suggesting recent sleepless nights. Thank you for coming. I imagine you have questions. The article I found said Sterling Tech is considering maintenance outsourcing. Richard's comment last night seemed to confirm it. So yes, I have questions. Patricia's fingers tapped a restless rhythm on the wooden tabletop. The board is considering several options for building operations management, but no decisions have been finalized. She met his gaze directly. I need you to understand something. Richard and I have fundamentally different visions for Sterling Tech. He wants aggressive cost-cutting to maximize short-term profits before our next funding round. I believe in building sustainable operations that prioritize quality and retain valuable institutional knowledge. A flicker of genuine emotion crossed her features, vulnerability showing through practiced control. This isn't just about maintenance operations, it's about the soul of the company I built. Robert leaned back, assessing her words for performance versus authenticity. Even if that's true, why involve me? I'm just the maintenance supervisor at one of your properties. Corporate power struggles happen well above my pay grade. For the first time since he'd met her, Patricia seemed to struggle with her words, customary precision giving way to something more uncertain. Because I need your help to stop it. Because your team at Riverside has created systems and procedures that should be a model for our entire property portfolio. Because you see through corporate facades to what actually matters. She hesitated. And because Emily would never forgive me if I let this happen. The mention of his daughter shifted something in Robert's perception. You've become fond of her. Patricia's answer came quietly, guard lowering by increments. Your daughter sees through pretense in a way most adults can't. She treats people as people, not positions or resources. A hint of vulnerability crossed her features. And yes, I've become fond of her, more than I expected or intended. Robert studied Patricia with newfound interest, seeing beyond the CEO to the woman underneath who seemed genuinely struggling with emotions she'd spent years suppressing. What exactly is Richard doing, and how could I possibly help stop it? Patricia took a sip of the coffee she'd ordered, gathering her thoughts with visible effort. Richard has prepared a detailed outsourcing proposal that appears to save millions annually. Lower fixed costs, reduced benefit obligations, greater operational flexibility. The numbers look impressive on paper, but they ignore the real-world complexities of building management. They don't account for the institutional knowledge that prevents catastrophic failures or the preventative work that never shows up in metrics because problems get solved before they happen. Models always look cleaner than reality. Robert drew on years of practical experience watching consultants make recommendations that collapsed under actual implementation. Exactly. Patricia's enthusiasm broke through her controlled exterior. That's precisely what I've been arguing to the board, but Richard has financial projections and consultant reports while I have, she gestured vaguely, intuition and principles. In corporate boardrooms, numbers usually win over concepts. So what do you need from me? Data. Real-world examples that demonstrate why your team's integrated approach creates value that outsourced services can't match. Documentation of how your preventative maintenance program reduces long-term costs. Specific instances where institutional knowledge prevented major problems that standard protocols would have missed. Robert considered her request, seeing both the professional opportunity and the personal implications. She was asking him to help make a case for keeping his own job, but framing it as fighting for something larger. I need to know something first. The dinner, the gala invitation, Emily's lab tour. Was that all strategic relationship building to enlist my help in your corporate power struggle? The question clearly struck home. Patricia set down her coffee cup, her composed exterior momentarily fracturing to reveal something more vulnerable. It didn't start that way. Our dinner was genuinely coincidental. She paused, searching for words. Your directness that night was startling. I can't remember the last time someone spoke to me as a person rather than as a position to be managed or a resource to be exploited. She met his eyes. The gala invitation was impulsive. I wanted to see if your authenticity would survive in a different context. Her voice softened further. And Emily. Emily wasn't calculated at all. Your daughter is extraordinary, Robert. The way she engages with the world without preconceptions or agenda, it's something I haven't experienced in a very long time. Robert could see the emotion behind her carefully controlled expression, recognition of a fundamental truth about his daughter that only someone who truly saw Emily could have articulated. All right, I'll help you put together the maintenance operation data. Not for Sterling Tech's bottom line or for your boardroom battle with Richard, but because good maintenance programs run by people who care about their buildings create better, safer environments for everyone. He paused. And because Emily would want me to help you. The tension in Patricia's shoulders visibly eased. Thank you. The board meeting is in 2 weeks. We don't have much time. They spent the next hour outlining the data they would need to compile. Emergency response metrics, preventative maintenance statistics, tenant satisfaction ratings, and specific examples where the maintenance team's institutional knowledge had prevented major systems failures. Robert described several incidents where Michael's decades of experience had identified potential problems that no inspection checklist would have caught. We should involve Michael directly, Robert suggested as they finalized their plan. He has 30 years of building systems experience and documentation going back before computerized maintenance records, and he's respected by the entire team. Patricia hesitated, executive caution warring with practical necessity. Richard has allies throughout the company. Expanding the circle of people who know about this internal conflict is risky. Michael has been my mentor since I started at Riverside. He's seen corporations make short-sighted decisions about maintenance operations for decades. He's never been the type to make things worse with rumors or speculation. He's practical, direct, and cares deeply about the building and his team. Patricia studied him for a long moment, then nodded decisively. If you trust him, that's good enough for me. The statement represented a significant shift from the imperious executive who'd first dismissed a restaurant server's humanity. They finalized logistics. Patricia would arrange for a conference room away from the executive floors. They'd meet starting Monday to begin compiling documentation. As they prepared to leave, Patricia touched Robert's arm lightly. Thank you for giving me the benefit of the doubt. I know my position makes it easy to assume the worst about my motivations. The simple acknowledgement of the power imbalance between them surprised Robert with its self-awareness. Everyone deserves to be judged by their actions, not their job title. Outside, the autumn evening had turned chilly with light mist softening the streetlights. Patricia's driver waited discreetly across the street in the black car, a reminder of the very different worlds they ordinarily occupied. "How is Emily doing after yesterday's excitement?" The question carried genuine interest rather than polite conversation management. "She hasn't stopped talking about it. The visualization systems particularly captured her imagination. She's already trying to create her own version using art supplies and coding tools from her school STEM program." Patricia's expression brightened. Dr. Mitchell mentioned how impressed she was with Emily's intuitive understanding of the interface. "She has a natural ability to connect technical concepts with visual representation. It's a rare combination." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both seemingly aware that their relationship had shifted into something neither had anticipated when they'd first encountered each other days earlier. "I'll have Jennifer send you the board presentation template tomorrow. If you and Michael can compile the maintenance operation data, I'll handle translating it into the financial metrics the board responds to." Monday morning arrived with Robert determined to begin gathering the data they would need. Michael was already in their shared office reviewing overnight maintenance logs with his customary thoroughness when Robert arrived earlier than usual. "You're here early. Everything okay?" Robert closed the office door, ensuring their conversation would remain private. "I met with Patricia Montgomery last night. The outsourcing situation is more complicated than we thought, and I need your help." Over the next 30 minutes, Robert explained the situation. Richard's manipulation of information, Patricia's efforts to preserve their maintenance operations, the 3 proposals under board consideration. Michael listened with the careful attention that had made him such an effective mentor, asking occasional clarifying questions but reserving judgment until Robert had finished. "So the CEO wants our help to fight her own CFO. That's not something you see every day in corporate America." "It sounds crazy, I know, but I believe she's sincere about wanting to maintain quality operations over cost cutting. She seems to genuinely value the kind of practical expertise our team represents." Michael studied his younger colleague with the wisdom of decades in building maintenance. "And there's nothing personal influencing your judgment here? No billionaire CEO taking special interest in a hard-working single dad and his precocious daughter?" Robert felt heat rise in his face at Michael's perceptiveness. "It's not like that. We're from completely different worlds." "Uh-huh." Michael's response carried skepticism but not unkindness. "Well, regardless of whatever else might be happening, I'm with you on fighting the outsourcing. What do you need from me?" Relieved by Michael's support, Robert outlined the data they needed to compile. As expected, Michael's institutional knowledge proved invaluable, producing documentation going back 15 years that demonstrated the clear financial and operational advantages of in-house maintenance teams with deep building-specific expertise. That afternoon, they met Patricia in a small conference room deliberately chosen for its distance from the executive floors. As they worked through the maintenance data, Robert noticed Patricia gradually relaxing into a more natural version of herself. Still brilliant and strategic, but without the carefully maintained corporate facade she typically presented to the world. Her genuine interest in the technical details of building operations revealed someone who understood and valued practical knowledge, not just as means to financial ends, but as worthwhile expertise in its own right. When Michael made an offhand joke about HVAC compressor failure patterns, Patricia laughed with genuine amusement, and the sound transformed her face completely. Michael caught Robert's eye afterward, raising an eyebrow with unspoken commentary. The message was clear. She's different around you. By late afternoon, they'd developed comprehensive documentation demonstrating that properties maintaining consistent in-house teams showed 37% fewer catastrophic failures and 22% higher tenant satisfaction ratings than those that had transitioned to outsourced maintenance, even when controlling for building age and condition. Thursday afternoon arrived with Emily practically vibrating with excitement about the lab tour. Robert arranged to leave work early, meeting Emily at her school and taking the subway to Sterling Tech headquarters. His daughter's eyes widened as they approached the imposing glass tower. "Dad, it's like a giant crystal growing out of the ground. Does Miss Patricia work at the very top like a queen in a tower?" Robert chuckled at the apt if somewhat fairy tale comparison. "Her office is near the top, yes, but we're visiting the research labs, which I think are a few floors down." Security protocols for visitors were thorough but unobtrusive, with special attention paid to making Emily feel welcome rather than scrutinized. They were issued visitor badges with their photos already printed. Clearly their arrival had been anticipated, and escorted to a mid-level floor where the research and development facilities were located. Jennifer met them at the elevator, greeting Emily with particular warmth. "Ms. Montgomery is looking forward to showing you the labs herself. She's just finishing a call and will join you momentarily." Patricia appeared minutes later, dressed more casually than Robert had seen previously, dark trousers and a simple blue blouse rather than her usual formal business attire. The modification seemed deliberately intended to appear more approachable, particularly to Emily. "Welcome to Sterling Tech," she greeted them, directing her attention first to Emily with warmth that seemed genuine rather than strategically deployed. "Are you ready to see some of the projects our engineers and scientists are working on?" Emily's natural enthusiasm quickly overcame her initial shyness. "Yes, Dad said you have robots and special computers that can see things people can't." "We do indeed. Shall we start with the robotics lab? I think you'll find it particularly interesting." What followed was a comprehensive tour of Sterling Tech's research facilities with Patricia herself, explaining complex technological concepts in terms that engaged Emily without talking down to her. Robert observed with interest as Patricia demonstrated a level of technical knowledge and genuine passion for innovation that seemed at odds with the cold corporate persona he'd initially encountered. In the robotics lab, Emily was introduced to a prototype security robot designed to patrol sensitive areas, its sensors capable of detecting unauthorized access attempts through multiple methods. The engineer supervising the project, clearly briefed about their visit, allowed Emily to help guide the robot through a simple obstacle course using a tablet interface. The robot uses artificial intelligence to learn about its environment, Patricia explained as Emily directed the machine with increasing confidence. "It gets better at navigating and identifying potential security concerns the more it operates. Similar to how you learn more about your neighborhood the more you explore it." Emily's questions were direct and insightful in the way only children's questions could be, cutting through technical complexity to fundamental issues. "But what if someone tricks it? Dad says the best security systems still need people to make sure they're working right." Patricia nodded approvingly. "Your father is exactly right. Technology is a tool, not a replacement for human judgment. That's why all our systems include human oversight and verification protocols." Throughout the tour, Robert noticed Patricia gradually relaxing, her interactions with Emily becoming more natural and less carefully calibrated. When they visited the Environmental Systems Lab where Sterling Tech was developing energy-efficient climate control technology, Patricia deferred to Robert's practical expertise several times, acknowledging the limitations of theoretical models when confronted with real-world implementation challenges. "This is why I wanted you both to see our work," Patricia commented as they observed a demonstration of adaptive lighting systems designed to reduce energy consumption. "Emily asks the questions our engineers sometimes forget to consider, and you understand the practical applications in ways our theoretical team doesn't always grasp." The comments seemed genuine rather than calculated flattery, reflecting authentic recognition of different types of valuable knowledge. Robert found himself reassessing Patricia yet again, seeing glimpses of someone whose corporate armor concealed a more complex person than he'd initially assumed. The tour concluded in a specialized lab where technology and art intersected, a space devoted to visualization systems that translated complex data into comprehensible visual formats. The lead researcher, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, showed Emily how security information could be represented through color patterns and spatial relationships rather than traditional numerical displays. This is where science becomes art, Dr. Mitchell explained, helping Emily use a simplified version of their modeling software to create visual representations of building access patterns. We're trying to make complex information understandable through visual intuition rather than just analysis. Emily was completely absorbed in the demonstration, her natural aptitude for both artistic and logical thinking making her an ideal audience for the project. As she experimented with different visualization approaches, Patricia moved to stand beside Robert, observing Emily's engagement with evident satisfaction. She has remarkable intuitive understanding. The ability to see connections between seemingly unrelated elements is rare, especially at her age. Robert watched his daughter with pride. She's always been able to approach problems from unexpected angles. Her teachers say she connects dots that others don't even see are related. Patricia nodded thoughtfully. That kind of integrative thinking is precisely what we try to nurture here. Too much specialization creates artificial boundaries between disciplines that should inform each other. As Dr. Mitchell continued working with Emily, Patricia turned to Robert with unexpected directness. Have you considered what educational opportunities would best develop her obvious talents? Her current school is adequate, but unlikely to fully nurture her particular gifts. The question touched on a sensitive point. Robert was acutely aware of the educational advantages his limited resources couldn't provide, despite Emily's obvious potential. We make do with what's available. The public STEM program at her school is actually quite good. Patricia seemed about to respond when her phone vibrated with an incoming message. Checking it briefly, her expression tightened into a controlled mask of professional concern. I apologize, but something requires my immediate attention. Jennifer will ensure you see anything else of interest before you leave. The abrupt shift was jarring after the relaxed interaction of the previous hour. Patricia thanked Emily for visiting, promised to arrange another tour when more projects were ready for demonstration, and departed with the efficient purpose of an executive managing a crisis. Jennifer appeared moments later, smoothly taking over the tour and explaining that Patricia had been called to an unexpected board matter. She guided them through a few remaining labs before escorting them back to the main lobby, arranging for a company car to take them home despite Robert's assurance that the subway would be fine. As they rode home in unexpected luxury, Emily chattered excitedly about everything she'd seen, particularly the visualization systems that had so captured her imagination. Robert listened with one ear, his thoughts preoccupied with Patricia's abrupt departure and what board matter might have required such immediate attention. The answer came later that evening in the form of a business news alert on his phone. Sterling Tech accelerates operational restructuring. Outsourcing rumors confirmed. The article, citing anonymous sources within the company, claimed that the board had approved an aggressive timeline for transitioning building maintenance operations to third-party vendors across all properties, with implementation to begin within 30 days. The timing couldn't be coincidence. The board meeting Patricia had mentioned wasn't supposed to happen for 2 weeks. Yet somehow a decision appeared to have been made, or at least leaked, on the very day she had personally hosted them for a lab tour. The contradiction between her apparent sincerity during their discussions and this development left Robert with growing sense that he'd been managed exactly as Michael had warned. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't what it appears. We need to talk. PM. The message only deepened Robert's confusion and sense of betrayal. If Patricia had known about the board's plans while showing them around her company with apparent openness, the entire interaction took on a more calculated aspect. Yet something about her genuine engagement with Emily and evident passion for the technology they'd seen made him hesitate to assume the worst. As Emily finally wound down from her excitement and prepared for bed, Robert found himself at a crossroads. The corporate executive who might be eliminating his team's jobs and the woman who had connected so genuinely with his daughter seemed like two different people occupying the same elegant form. His phone buzzed again with another message from Patricia. Richard forced the issue with selective information. "Don't trust what you're reading. Meet me tomorrow 7 p.m., same place. This isn't over." Robert stared at the message, weighing competing instincts. Trust the connection he'd felt during their meetings, or protect himself and his team from corporate maneuvering that could destroy their livelihoods. After long consideration, he typed a reply. "I'll be there." But as he prepared for bed, checking on Emily one final time, doubt gnawed at his resolve. Tomorrow would determine whether Patricia was manipulating him as part of some elaborate corporate strategy, or if there were genuine human connections forming that transcended their different worlds and responsibilities. The question that troubled him most as sleep finally came was how he would explain to Emily if Patricia proved to be simply using them for some corporate purpose. His daughter had connected with the woman in a way that suggested she had seen something genuine beneath Patricia's careful exterior. Robert hoped, for Emily's sake as well as his own increasingly confused feelings, that his daughter's instincts about Patricia's need for authentic connection would prove more accurate than his own wary suspicions. Friday morning arrived with media headlines that made Robert's stomach turn before he'd finished his first coffee. Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, local business press, all carrying variations of the same story. Sterling Tech's maintenance outsourcing decision framed as inevitable progress, with quotes from unnamed board sources praising Richard Hayes's financial acumen and questioning Patricia Montgomery's attachment to outdated operational models. The articles didn't just report corporate restructuring, they mocked it. One particularly cruel piece suggested the CEO was relying on janitor's intuition over data-driven analysis, the contempt dripping from every paragraph. Robert recognized the coordinated nature of the attack. This wasn't accidental leaking. Someone had orchestrated a media campaign designed to make Patricia's position untenable. His phone rang before he could process the full implications. Patricia's voice carried controlled fury barely restrained beneath professional composure. "Have you seen the coverage?" "Reading it now." Richard planted every word. "Board meeting isn't until next Thursday, but he's creating the impression of a done deal to force their hand. Public expectations become self-fulfilling prophecies in corporate governance." A pause. Vulnerability bleeding through. "I need you to know, I didn't authorize any of this. I'm fighting it." Robert heard genuine distress beneath her words, but doubt still gnawed at him. "How do I know you're not just managing me, softening the blow before the inevitable happens?" The silence stretched long enough that Robert thought the connection had dropped. When Patricia spoke again, her voice carried raw honesty he'd never heard before. "You don't. You have to choose whether to trust me based on everything we've shared, knowing I could be lying. Just like I have to trust that you're helping me because you believe in what's right, not because you think it'll save your job." Her breath caught. "We're both taking risks here, Robert. The difference is I have billions to fall back on if this fails. You have Emily and a mortgage and people depending on you. I understand if you walk away." The admission of power imbalance, the acknowledgement that she was asking him to risk more than she was, it felt authentic in a way calculated manipulation never could. "I'm not walking away, but I need you to be straight with me. No more surprises." "No more surprises." Relief flooded her voice. "Meet me tonight, same place. We need to accelerate our timeline." At Riverside, the atmosphere had shifted from anxious speculation to outright hostility. Robert walked into the maintenance office to find his team gathered around Michael's computer, faces grim as they read the business coverage. Conversation stopped when he entered. replaced by accusing stares. Carlos, one of the HVAC technicians, broke the silence. "So when were you planning to tell us you've been cozying up to Montgomery while she plans to eliminate our jobs?" The betrayal in his voice cut deeper than Robert had anticipated. "It's not like that. I'm trying to help stop the outsourcing. By going to fancy parties and touring her offices." Sarah, the electrical specialist, couldn't hide her bitterness. "While the rest of us are wondering how we'll feed our families when ProService takes over at half our wages." Michael stepped forward, voice carrying authority earned through decades. "Everyone calm down. Robert's been working with Montgomery to build a case against outsourcing, compiling data to prove we're more valuable than contract labor. And how's that working out?" Carlos gestured at the computer screen. "Because it looks like we're getting screwed anyway, and Robert's the one helping hold the door open." Robert felt the familiar heat rise in his chest, anger at the injustice mixing with guilt that maybe they were right to question his judgment. "I understand you're scared. I'm scared too. But turning on each other won't solve anything. We have 1 week before the actual board meeting, 1 week to prove our value is worth more than Richard Hayes's spreadsheets. Or 1 week before you get promoted to some cushy corporate job while the rest of us hit the unemployment line." Sarah's accusation landed like a physical blow. Before Robert could respond, his phone buzzed with a priority alert from the 12th floor. West Ridge Financial reporting climate control failure affecting their server room. The kind of high-priority situation that required immediate attention regardless of personal drama. "We'll continue this later. Right now I need to handle West Ridge before their servers overheat and they threaten to break their lease again." The elevator ride gave Robert precious minutes to compartmentalize. Whatever was happening with Patricia and corporate politics, his immediate responsibility remained the building and its systems. Professional duty provided welcome escape from questions he couldn't fully answer. Westridge Financial's reception area projected wealth management credibility through careful design. Dark wood paneling meeting glass walls, market data streaming across digital displays. The receptionist recognized Robert immediately, relief evident. "Thank God you're here. Mr. Keller is about to have a meltdown about the server room temperature. It's climbed 8 degrees in the last hour." Robert nodded, already mentally reviewing possible causes as he headed directly to the server room. The increased heat was immediately noticeable despite still being within technical safety parameters. Westridge's IT director, Alan Pierce, hovered near the main console with barely controlled panic. "Miller, the monitoring system says we're approaching critical temperature thresholds. What's happening?" The fear in Pierce's voice was understandable. Millions of dollars in equipment, irreplaceable client data, potential catastrophic failures that could end careers. Robert set down his tools and moved directly to the environmental control panel, checking readings and system status indicators with practiced efficiency. "When did you first notice the temperature increase?" "About an hour ago, started gradually, then accelerated. We've powered down non-essential systems to reduce heat generation, but if this keeps climbing, we'll have to initiate emergency shutdown procedures." Robert saw the likely culprit in the diagnostic readings within minutes. Partial failure in the secondary cooling unit, the primary trying to compensate but unable to handle the full load alone. He accessed the system controls, making adjustments to optimize the functioning unit's performance. "This will stabilize things temporarily while I repair the secondary unit. You're not in immediate danger." Over the next 40 minutes, Robert methodically diagnosed and resolved the issue. A failed compressor relay that had created a cascade effect through the cooling system. The work required both technical knowledge and physical dexterity, navigating cramped space behind server racks while making precision adjustments to delicate components. As the temperature began steadily decreasing back toward optimal ranges, Pierce's anxiety visibly reduced. "You've saved us from potential disaster. A full shutdown would have cost us zillions in interrupted transactions." Robert closed the access panel and began gathering his tools. "Just doing my job. I'll order a replacement relay with better heat tolerance. The OEM component isn't really designed for the load you're putting on it with your new server configuration. Pierce looked surprised. You identified that from just looking at our setup? It's a common issue with this model when used in high-density server environments. Robert explained the heat pattern and failure points. I've seen it in 3 other installations this year. As Robert completed his maintenance report in the hallway outside the server room, a familiar voice caught him by surprise. Impressive work in there. Patricia stood a few feet away, corporate attire and confident posture marking her as clearly the CEO visiting properties, not the vulnerable woman who texted him last night. Today, she projected authority without flamboyance, precisely tailored charcoal suit commanding respect through understatement rather than ostentation. I didn't realize you were visiting Riverside today. Quarterly property review. I was meeting with West Ridge about their lease renewal when the server room situation developed. Your response time was excellent. Robert finished his report before responding, a small assertion of professional focus that Patricia seemed to note with approval. High-priority alerts get immediate attention, especially for critical systems like server cooling. Patricia studied him with that calculating gaze Emily had described as trying to solve a puzzle. Pierce mentioned that you identified a design limitation their own IT team had missed. Robert shrugged slightly. Experience. You see enough failures, you start recognizing patterns. Precisely why hands-on expertise is invaluable. Patricia's comment echoed previous observations but carried new weight given current circumstances. Are you free for lunch today? There are matters we should discuss. The direct transition to business reminded Robert of their fundamentally different positions regardless of whatever personal connection had developed. Yes, my schedule is clear from noon to 1. Good. Jennifer will send a car for you at 11:45. With that, Patricia turned and walked toward the executive conference room, leaving Robert with distinct impression he'd just received a command rather than an invitation. The sleek black car arrived with Jennifer's characteristic precision, whisking Robert from Riverside's service entrance to Sterling Tech's downtown headquarters in less than 15 minutes. The contrast between his morning spent fixing mechanical systems in cramped spaces and the rarefied atmosphere of Patricia's corporate domain was jarring. Sterling Tech occupied the upper 15 floors of a gleaming glass tower that dominated its section of the Boston skyline. The lobby featured the company's security technology subtly integrated into an aesthetic of transparent modern luxury, with soft-spoken security personnel whose professional demeanor couldn't quite hide specialized training. Jennifer met Robert at the executive elevator, her efficient greeting carrying genuine warmth. Mr. Williams, thank you for joining Ms. Montgomery. She's waiting in her private dining room. The elevator ascended directly to the 35th floor, opening onto a reception area offering spectacular views of Boston Harbor through floor-to-ceiling windows. Jennifer led Robert through to a small but elegantly appointed dining room where Patricia was reviewing documents at a table already set for lunch. Robert? She greeted him, setting aside her tablet. Thank you for making time. Please sit. As Robert took a seat, he noted that Patricia had arranged for them to be alone. No assistants, no other executives, not even service staff visible. A carefully arranged lunch was already present under silver covers, suggesting she'd planned this conversation to avoid interruptions. I assume you have questions about what Richard mentioned at the gala, about operational restructuring. Robert appreciated the lack of pretense. I saw the news about potential outsourcing. My team is understandably concerned. Patricia's expression revealed nothing as she removed the cover from her salad. The article was premature and incomplete. The board is considering several options for building operations management, but no decisions have been finalized. With respect, that sounds like standard corporate language before layoffs. My team deserves better than management platitudes. Something like respect flickered in Patricia's eyes at his directness. Fair enough. The full proposal includes 3 options. Complete outsourcing to third-party vendors, creating a separate subsidiary specializing in building maintenance that would service our properties and potentially others, or restructuring existing teams with enhanced training and technology integration. I'm advocating for the third option, but Richard and several board members favor outsourcing for its immediate cost benefits. The frankness of her response surprised Robert. Why are you telling me this? These kinds of decisions are usually made behind closed doors, with employees finding out only after everything's decided. Patricia set down her fork, studying him with analytical intensity. Because your team at Riverside has the highest efficiency ratings and lowest maintenance costs across our entire property portfolio. You've created systems and procedures that I believe should be standardized throughout our operations. She paused, seeming to consider her next words carefully. And because I've observed you solve problems that expensive consultants failed to address with a fraction of their resources. Robert processed this information cautiously. So you're what? Researching our team as a model? Using the gala invitation to observe the maintenance supervisor in a social setting? Patricia's acknowledgement came with surprising candor. Initially, perhaps, our dinner encounter was genuinely coincidental, but it presented an opportunity to understand your approach directly. Her voice softened. What I didn't anticipate was Emily. The mention of his daughter immediately heightened Robert's attention. What about Emily? Patricia's expression shifted, revealing something more vulnerable beneath professional composure. Children reveal truths about their parents, how they're raised, what values they're taught. Your daughter is thoughtful, curious, and remarkably unintimidated by situations that would make most adults uncomfortable. She treats everyone with the same genuine respect, regardless of their position or status. She met his gaze directly. That doesn't happen by accident. Robert felt complex mix of parental pride and continued wariness about Patricia's motivations. Emily's character is her own achievement. I just try to provide a stable example. A modest answer, but revealing, Patricia observed. Most people in your position would have used Saturday night to network aggressively, leveraging the opportunity for personal advancement. Instead, you focused on making the experience positive for Emily while maintaining your authentic perspective, even when it might have been easier to simply agree with the wealthy donors at your table. Robert wasn't entirely comfortable with being studied like a specimen. I'm still not clear on why you're sharing confidential corporate planning with me. Patricia's response was direct, cutting through corporate circumlocution. Because I want your input on the restructuring proposal before it's finalized. The maintenance teams are vital to our property's function and value, yet the decision makers have limited understanding of what you actually do. Your practical perspective would be valuable. The request was unexpected enough that Robert took a moment to consider its implications. You're asking me to help design a system that could potentially eliminate my own team's jobs. I'm asking you to help create a model that would preserve the most effective elements of your operation while addressing the board's concerns about consistency and cost management across properties. Patricia corrected. My goal is to demonstrate that in-house teams with proper support are more effective than outsourced alternatives, but I need concrete operational details to make that case. Robert's natural caution warred with his desire to protect his team and the standards they'd worked hard to establish. If I agree to this, I need transparency about how the information will be used. And my team needs to know what's happening. Keeping them in the dark while their future is being decided isn't right. Patricia considered this for a moment before nodding. I can agree to keep you informed about how your input influences the proposal. As for your team, you can tell them that alternatives are being considered, but no decisions have been made. Further details would need to remain confidential until the board reviews final proposals. It wasn't everything Robert wanted, but it was more consideration than most executives would offer employees at his level. I'll need to think about it. Of course, I wouldn't expect an immediate decision. Patricia returned to her lunch with practiced composure. The board meeting is scheduled for next Thursday, so there's time for careful consideration. The remainder of lunch shifted to less contentious topics. Emily's upcoming visit, technical aspects of building management that clearly interested Patricia more than Robert had initially realized. Her questions revealed genuine knowledge about systems integration and efficiency modeling that surprised him. Most executives treated maintenance as unfortunate necessity rather than strategic component of property management. As lunch concluded, Patricia walked with Robert to the elevator, their conversation continuing about technical aspects of predictive maintenance scheduling. In the middle of explaining a particular approach to equipment lifecycle management, Patricia suddenly stopped, rare expression of uncertainty crossing her features. "I have a personal request unrelated to business matters. I'd like to join you and Emily for the lab tour next Thursday, not just a brief appearance, but to actually guide you through the facilities myself." The request struck Robert as uncharacteristically vulnerable, coming from someone who typically issued directives rather than invitations. "Any particular reason?" Patricia hesitated, something Robert hadn't observed before. "Your daughter's perspective is refreshing. Children see things adults miss, ask questions we've forgotten to ask." She paused again. "And I rarely have the opportunity to share the technical aspects of our work with someone who appreciates them for their own sake rather than just their profit potential." The honesty of the admission resonated with Robert more than he'd expected. "Emily would like that. She's been talking about the visit non-stop since you mentioned it." A genuine smile briefly transformed Patricia's features before her usual composed expression returned. "Excellent. I'll arrange my schedule accordingly." As Robert rode the elevator down from the executive floor, he reflected on the increasingly complicated nature of his interactions with Patricia Montgomery. What had begun as chance encounter had evolved into something neither purely professional nor truly personal, with corporate agendas and human connections intertwining in ways he couldn't easily categorize. Returning to Riverside, Robert found Michael waiting in their office with barely contained tension. "You had lunch with Montgomery herself? What happened? Are the outsourcing rumors true?" Robert shared what he could without violating the confidentiality Patricia had requested, explaining that multiple options were being considered but no final decisions had been made. Patricia wanted his input on the maintenance operations model as part of the evaluation process. Michael looked skeptical. "Sounds like they want you to help design the system that replaces us. Classic corporate move. Get the insiders to create the blueprint, then hand it to the lowest bidding contractor." "Maybe," Robert acknowledged, unable to completely dismiss the possibility despite Patricia's seeming sincerity. "But if there's a chance to influence the decision in a way that preserves our team, I need to consider it." "Just be careful," Michael warned. "Getting close to the executive level when restructuring is happening is dangerous territory. Either you're being groomed for something bigger, or you're being managed until they don't need you anymore." The warning resonated with concerns Robert had already been considering. Patricia's interest in his operational approach made professional sense, but her desire to connect with Emily on personal level added complexity that defied simple corporate maneuvering. People as successful as Patricia Montgomery didn't achieve their position without strategic calculation. Yet there had been moments of apparent genuine connection that couldn't be easily dismissed as manipulation. Her vulnerability when discussing her first company's betrayal, her authentic engagement with Emily's enthusiasm, her evident passion for the technology during their lab tour. The contradiction troubled Robert as he worked through the afternoon's routine maintenance tasks. Which version of Patricia Montgomery was authentic? The calculating CEO or the person who seemed to genuinely value human connection she'd spent years avoiding? His phone buzzed with a text as he was preparing to leave for the day. "Patricia, thank you for lunch. For what it's worth, I meant what I said about Emily. She's remarkable. PM." Robert stared at the message, trying to parse genuine emotion from strategic relationship management. After consideration, he replied simply, "She gets that from her mother. See you tonight. R.W." That evening, Robert left Emily with Mrs. Chenin drove to Morton's Cafe, arriving early to gather his thoughts. When Patricia entered at precisely 7 p.m., she carried visible tension despite her casual attire, jeans and sweater again, hair in ponytail, attempting to project approachability through informality. She slid into the booth and began without preamble. Richard's accelerating his timeline. The media leaks were designed to create fait accompli pressure on the board. He's scheduled an emergency session for next Friday, moved up from the following Thursday, claiming market conditions require immediate decision. Robert felt ice settle in his stomach. So we have 1 week instead of 2. Less than that, we need the presentation ready by Wednesday for board review, which means we have 5 days to compile everything, translate it into financial projections and practice delivery. Patricia's fingers drummed restless rhythm on the table. I won't lie, the odds aren't good. Richard has board members convinced that outsourcing is inevitable. We're fighting against momentum and spreadsheets. What do you need from me? Everything you've got. Every example of institutional knowledge preventing catastrophic failures. Every instance where your team's integrated approach solved problems that standard protocols would have missed. Documentation proving that what you do has value beyond line-item cost analysis. They spent the next 2 hours mapping strategy. Michael would compile historical data on emergency responses and preventative maintenance outcomes. Robert would document specific incidents where expertise had prevented major systems failures. Patricia would translate everything into the financial metrics board members understood. Cost avoidance, tenant retention rates, property value preservation. As they worked, Robert noticed Patricia's guard lowering incrementally. She spoke about her frustration with board members who'd never built anything themselves, making decisions based purely on quarterly earnings projections. Her passion for Sterling Tech's original mission, creating security technology that actually protected people rather than just generating revenue, burned through practiced corporate detachment. I didn't build this company to become another soulless profit machine. The raw emotion in her voice surprised Robert. I built it because I believed technology could make people safer. That innovation mattered more than quarterly returns. Richard sees Sterling Tech as vehicle for personal enrichment. I see it as something that should outlast all of us. The conviction resonated with Robert's own philosophy about work having meaning beyond paychecks. Walls keep pain out, but they also keep life out. His words from their first dinner echoed between them. Maybe that applies to companies too. You can protect profits by cutting everything that seems inefficient, but eventually you're left with nothing worth protecting. Patricia's eyes met his with intensity that felt like standing under spotlights. How did you become so wise about things you've never experienced? I've experienced loss. That teaches you what actually matters pretty fast. Robert thought of Catherine, of the brutal education grief had provided. When everything gets stripped away except what's essential, you learn to recognize the difference between what's valuable and what's just expensive. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the truth of shared understanding passing between them without need for further words. I should get back to Emily, Robert finally said, but I'm in this with you. Whatever it takes to save our team's jobs and prove that some things are worth more than their cost on spreadsheets. Patricia's hand covered his briefly on the table, the gesture spontaneous and vulnerable. Thank you for trusting me despite having every reason not to. The next 5 days blurred together in intensive preparation. Robert and Michael worked late nights compiling maintenance records, documenting emergencies averted and catastrophes prevented. Patricia translated their technical expertise into business language, risk mitigation strategies, asset value preservation, competitive advantages through operational excellence. Thursday brought Emily's rescheduled lab tour, and despite the corporate crisis consuming Patricia's attention, she honored her commitment personally. Robert watched her interact with his daughter with genuine warmth, explaining visualization systems and robotics projects with patience that seemed to come from authentic place rather than calculated relationship management. When Emily asked if Patricia was sad about something, the perceptiveness cutting through adult pretense, Patricia knelt to her level with surprising honesty. "I'm fighting for something important, Emily. Sometimes that's hard, but being with you makes it easier to remember why it matters." The moment stayed with Robert as they prepared for the board presentation. Patricia was fighting for more than just corporate strategy. She was fighting for a vision of business that valued people alongside profits, that recognized expertise couldn't be reduced to cost-per-hour calculations. Wednesday evening arrived with final practice session in Patricia's office. Robert and Michael rehearsed their testimony while Patricia fine-tuned financial projections. The presentation was solid, compelling even, but they all knew Richard would come prepared with his own data and consultant backing. As they wrapped up near midnight, Patricia looked exhausted but determined. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you both to know. You've given me ammunition to fight with. Whether it's enough remains to be seen." Robert gathered his materials, then paused at the door. "Emily said something the other night. She said you can tell what people really want by watching what they do when they think nobody's watching." He met Patricia's tired eyes. "I've been watching. I think I know what you really want, and it's not what Richard assumes. That matters." Thursday morning brought Robert to Sterling Tech's headquarters with Michael, both wearing their best professional attire but feeling conspicuously out of place among the executives streaming into the boardroom. Jennifer met them with encouraging smile, but Robert could see tension in her shoulders. "Richard brought lawyers. He's treating this like a hostile takeover attempt rather than internal strategy discussion." Her warning carried weight. Be prepared for aggressive questioning. The boardroom embodied corporate power. Massive mahogany tables surrounded by ergonomic chairs occupied by men and women whose collective decisions affected thousands of lives and billions of dollars. Patricia stood at the head, her presentation displayed on multiple screens. Richard Hayes sat nearby, expression carefully neutral but tension evident in rigid posture. Margaret Foster, the board chair Robert recognized from the gala, called the meeting to order with efficient authority. "We're here to evaluate proposals for building operations management across Sterling Tech properties. Mr. Hayes will present the outsourcing proposal, followed by Ms. Montgomery's alternative approach. We'll hear from operational staff, then vote." Richard's presentation was masterful. Slick graphics, consultant testimonials, financial projections showing $8.7 million in annual savings. He made outsourcing sound not just sensible but inevitable, the natural evolution of modern corporate efficiency. When Patricia's turn came, she presented their data with equal polish but different emphasis, highlighting institutional knowledge, preventative maintenance value, tenant satisfaction correlation with consistent teams. She painted a picture of sustainable operations creating long-term value rather than short-term savings. Then came the testimony portion. Margaret directed her first question to Robert with skeptical directness. "Mr. Williams, you're asking us to believe that the differential response data from properties with in-house versus outsourced maintenance justifies significantly higher operational costs. What specific evidence supports this claim?" Robert stood, channeling years of explaining complex systems to skeptical clients. "Ma'am, 3 years ago, Anderson Tower experienced catastrophic HVAC failure that cost $4.7 million in emergency repairs, tenant compensation, and reputation damage. The third-party vendor they'd transitioned to 6 months earlier had followed standard inspection protocols, but missed system-specific warning signs that any long-term maintenance staff would have recognized immediately." He pulled up the detailed case study Patricia had helped him prepare. The failure wasn't due to vendor incompetence. It was due to lack of institutional knowledge about that specific building's quirks, how its systems interacted under stress, which components showed early degradation patterns, what normal looked like for that environment. You can't checklist that kind of expertise into existence. A board member Robert didn't recognize leaned forward with clear skepticism. "That's anecdotal evidence, not data-driven analysis. Michael stood, decades of experience lending his voice authority Roberts couldn't match. With respect, sir, I've been in building maintenance for 30 years. I've seen these standardized preventative protocols. They're checking boxes, not truly maintaining buildings. They don't account for building-specific conditions, interaction effects between systems, or the thousand small things that experienced teams handle before they become big, expensive problems. Richard's response came sharp and dismissive. That's precisely the kind of subjective assessment that modern business practice has moved beyond. We need objective metrics, not feelings about building quirks. Robert felt anger rise but channeled it into clarity. Objective metrics only measure what you're tracking. Buildings aren't just collections of separate systems that can be maintained independently. They're living environments where HVAC interacts with electrical loads, where seasonal patterns affect structural stress, where occupancy changes create cascading effects most models never capture. He pulled up comparative data Patricia had compiled. Properties maintaining consistent in-house teams show 37% fewer catastrophic failures and 22% higher tenant satisfaction ratings than those that transition to outsourced maintenance, even controlling for building age and condition. That's not anecdotal. That's pattern. The board members exchanged glances, and Robert could see his words landing with some while others remained skeptical. Margaret seemed genuinely engaged, but several members appeared already decided. Richard seized the moment with calculated precision. This isn't about operational philosophy. It's about the CEO's personal involvement with an employee creating conflict of interest that clouds judgment about business decisions. He projected photos onto the screens. Images from the charity gala showing Patricia, Robert, and Emily together, candid shots that captured moments of genuine connection. Ms. Montgomery has developed inappropriate relationship with Mr. Williams that's influencing her assessment of his team's value. This isn't objective analysis, it's emotional manipulation of board decisions. The accusation landed like a grenade. Board members stiffened, whispered conversations erupting around the table. Robert felt his face flush with anger and humiliation at having his integrity questioned so publicly. Patricia stood, and her voice when she spoke carried fury barely restrained beneath professional control. Robert Williams has more integrity in his work boots than most people in this room have in their entire careers. Her gaze swept the board before landing on Richard with cutting precision. Including you, Richard. The room erupted in shocked silence. Margaret raised her hand for order, but before she could speak, Michael stood with deliberate calm that commanded attention. Before this board makes any decision, you should know something about Mr. Hayes that directly affects his objectivity regarding outsourcing proposals. Michael's tablet connected to the presentation system, and forensic accounting documents filled the screens. Wire transfers, email trails, payment schedules. Richard Hayes has received $500,000 in bribes from ProService Solutions, the outsourcing company he's been advocating for. These documents show systematic payments disguised as consulting fees, along with email correspondence in which Mr. Hayes guaranteed ProService would receive the Sterling Tech contract in exchange for kickbacks tied to contract value. The boardroom descended into chaos. Richard shot to his feet, face draining of color. That's fabricated evidence. This is corporate sabotage. Michael's voice remained steady, prosecutorial in its precision. The forensic accounting was performed by an independent firm. The email metadata has been verified, and the FBI has been investigating this matter for the past 2 weeks based on information I provided. As if on cue, Jennifer entered the boardroom accompanied by a woman in a dark suit who identified herself as Special Agent Morrison. Mr. Hayes, we need you to come with us. We have questions about your financial relationship with ProService Solutions. Richard's protests grew increasingly desperate as security escorted him from the room, but the damage was catastrophic and final. The board sat in stunned silence as the implications settled over them like ash after explosion. Margaret recovered first, calling for emergency recess to allow board members to process what had just occurred. Robert and Michael were asked to wait in an adjacent conference room while the board deliberated in private session. The next 2 hours stretched like years. Robert paced while Michael sat with characteristic calm, both avoiding speculation about outcomes they couldn't control. Through the conference room's glass walls, they could see board members engaged in intense discussion, gestures animated, faces serious. Patricia appeared once briefly, exhaustion evident in her features. Whatever they decide, you both did everything possible. The corruption exposure changes everything, but I don't know which direction they'll move. Some board members may see this as vindication of my position. Others might view the entire situation as too chaotic and vote for outsourcing anyway just to impose order. When they were finally called back to the boardroom, the tension was palpable. Margaret stood at the head of the table, her expression giving nothing away. The board has voted on the following resolutions. First, Richard Hayes is terminated from Sterling Tech effective immediately, and we will cooperate fully with federal investigation into his conduct. Second, we approve implementation of Ms. Montgomery's enhanced in-house maintenance program across all properties, with funding for additional training and technology integration. Relief flooded through Robert so intensely he felt lightheaded. His team was safe. The jobs were protected. They'd won. But Margaret wasn't finished. Third, given the serious governance failures this situation has revealed, we require Ms. Montgomery to step back from day-to-day operations and appoint a chief operating officer with board approval to provide operational oversight. Ms. Montgomery will retain CEO title and strategic vision authority, but execution will require COO sign-off. Patricia's expression revealed nothing, but Robert saw her hands tighten briefly on the table edge before relaxing. I accept those terms. The enhanced maintenance program is worth the oversight structure. Margaret nodded. Very well. This meeting is adjourned. Ms. Montgomery will need your COO recommendation by next week. As board members filed out, several approached Patricia with congratulations that felt perfunctory rather than warm. The victory was real, but it had cost her something significant. Autonomy she'd fought decades to maintain. Robert waited until the room had cleared before approaching. You did it. You saved the program. Patricia's smile carried exhaustion and something deeper, relief mixed with melancholy. We did it. Your testimony made the difference. Michael's evidence sealed it. She paused. But Richard was partially right. My personal involvement with you and Emily did influence my judgment. I fought harder for this program because I'd seen firsthand what institutional knowledge looks like, what integrity means in practice. That connection made me better, not worse, at recognizing value. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of what they'd accomplished settling alongside uncertainty about what came next. I should go find Emily. Tell her the good news about the jobs. Patricia nodded, but something vulnerable flickered across her features. Robert, I need to ask you something, and I want complete honesty. She took a breath, gathering courage for a question that clearly cost her. These past weeks with you and Emily, is this relationship developing because you genuinely want it to? Or because I'm still ultimately your employer and you feel some obligation? The raw vulnerability in her voice transformed the question from abstract to deeply personal. Robert considered his response carefully, knowing the importance of absolute honesty in this moment. When we first met, I stood up to you because I believed everyone deserves basic respect, regardless of their position. That hasn't changed. I've never made decisions about personal relationships based on professional advantage, and I'm not starting now. He met her gaze directly. Emily and I have welcomed you into our lives because we value who you are, not what you own or what position you hold. If you were still just the person who'd yelled at restaurant staff, we wouldn't be here. But you're not that person, or you're more than that person. You're someone learning to be human again after years of armor. That's who Emily sees when she says you look sad. That's who I see when your guard drops. Patricia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Vulnerability she'd spent decades suppressing finally breaking through. Thank you for that. My position makes it difficult to trust people's motivations. It's been a very long time since I experienced relationships that weren't in some way transactional. Well, Emily's affection is completely non-transactional. Robert offered a gentle smile. Unless you count her expectation that you'll admire every new sprout in the container garden. Patricia's laughter held genuine joy, the sound transforming her face completely. A responsibility I take very seriously. The following Sunday afternoon, Patricia joined them at their modest apartment for garden planting as promised. Dressed in jeans with her hair pulled back, hands getting dirty with soil and seeds, she looked more relaxed than Robert had ever seen her. Emily taught her about spacing and depth and patience with 9-year-old authority, and Patricia followed instructions with endearing seriousness. As they worked, Robert noticed neighbors watching with curiosity. Mrs. Chen smiling knowingly, the Hernandez kids fascinated by the sight of their building's most unusual visitor. But Patricia seemed genuinely unbothered by the attention, focused entirely on Emily's enthusiasm about fall vegetables and growing things. After planting finished and they'd shared a simple dinner at the kitchen table, Emily eventually fell asleep on the couch with her drawing pad. Robert and Patricia stood on the balcony in comfortable silence, looking out at their modest view of neighboring buildings and distant city lights. "Thank you for today." Patricia's voice carried quiet wonder. "For letting me be part of something real." Robert studied her profile, seeing the woman rather than the CEO, the person who'd been hiding behind corporate armor for so long she'd almost forgotten what connection felt like. Is that what's been missing? Reality? Patricia considered the question with her characteristic thoughtfulness. When you achieve a certain level of success, people start managing your reality. They filter information, anticipate needs, remove obstacles before you even encounter them. It creates efficiency but eliminates. She gestured toward the simple container garden they'd planted together. No one brings dirt and seeds into my carefully curated world. The insight explained much about Patricia's response to Robert's directness and Emily's natural authenticity. In a life surrounded by strategic calculation and careful management, genuine human connection had become the rarest commodity. Over the following weeks, an unexpected pattern developed. Patricia began appearing regularly in their lives, weeknight dinners at the kitchen table, helping Emily with science projects, even attending a particularly painful elementary school concert where Emily proudly demonstrated her ability to play simple melodies on the recorder without most of the squeaky parts. At Riverside, the enhanced maintenance program brought additional resources and recognition for the team's work. Michael took on formal mentoring role for newer team members, his decades of experience finally acknowledged as the valuable asset it had always been. The corporate battle with Richard continued through legal channels, but his influence had been permanently broken. 3 months later, as Boston winter began yielding to early spring, Patricia hosted Sterling Tech's holiday party with one significant change. Robert and Emily attended as her personal guests, rather than corporate outsiders. The executive whispers were noticeable, but Patricia seemed genuinely unbothered, introducing Emily to impressed colleagues and presenting Robert as someone whose practical expertise she valued. When spring finally arrived, 6 months after that first restaurant encounter, their container garden bloomed with vegetables they'd planted together. Morning sunlight illuminated the balcony as Robert, Patricia, and Emily checked the progress of kale, spinach, and peas climbing the railing. Emily picked the first mature vegetables with ceremonial care. "See? Best things grow in places you don't expect them to. Mom used to say people are like gardens. They grow best when someone believes in them." Patricia looked at Robert with expression that held gratitude and something deeper. Recognition that what had grown between them was as unexpected as it was genuine. "Your mother was a wise woman." Robert's voice carried warmth and peace when he responded. "She'd be happy knowing Emily has another strong woman to learn from." The camera pulled back from their balcony garden, showing the modest apartment building, then the Boston skyline beyond, 2 worlds that had found unexpected harmony through simple human connection. Walls keep pain out, but they also keep life out. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't building higher walls, it's learning when to open the door and let someone in.